After the negative move, we're ready to get into our positive move, or the stride. And the stride is where most hitters get into trouble. The stride, or the positive move, can also happen a matter of different ways that's dependent on style. First, what we try to teach youth hitters is that the stride is an entire body movement where three things are going to move forward together. Once I load against my back leg and the energy is stored on the inside part of my back quad, I want to walk that energy forward where my back knee, my stride foot, and my belly button all move forward together. And you can think of that in a number of different ways. I use different terminology for different kids, knowing that one of these three ways is going to stick for them. I can think that my back knee advances my front foot. I can think that my front foot pulls the back knee along. Or I can simply think that the belly button advances me to center. When I get to my center, my foot down position, all hitters look virtually the same. How they get there is a matter of style. There are other ways that a hitter can advance in their positive move to center. This is a matter of style as well. You'll have some hitters that stride away in what I call a stride shift, where they stride away from a dead backside, the knee stays over the ankle, and they shift to center. Ian Kinsler is one of the guys that does that. You'll have guys out of a no stride position. In the no stride, they'll have an inward turn where the heel lifts, and then my back knee advances me to center. What all three of these things have in common is that the back knee has to advance first in the lower body. If you think of the swing sequence as a long row of dominoes falling one by one, the back knee is the first domino to fall, and it starts the kinetic chain up the body. Very important that it advances first as we get to center. When I mentioned that all big league hitters look virtually the same at foot down, once I get to that centered position, the body is going to be in an equal 50-50 position. That 50-50 position is the body's strongest and most athletic, most powerful position that you can use in any sport. I can field a ground ball from that position. I could tackle somebody in football from that position. And I often compare this to my basketball defensive stance or my base stealing stance. What do we want to do in both of those? My basketball defensive stance, my base stealing stance, I want to be fast and explosive. When I get to my center as a hitter, I want to be fast and explosive. When my stride foot hits the ground, I want to make sure that my toes are in line with one another. And it's because that my hands often want to follow the direction my body first creates. If I can stride to an on-line toe position, my hands often want to go in that same direct line to the baseball. Nothing will ruin a good hand path quicker than a poor stride foot. And you get a lot of amateur players, they end up striding across their back foot, and now there's no way they can go in a direct line to the ball without tying themselves up or feeling like they're jamming themselves. So now the hands have to go around the front side of the body in a much longer swing that's going to hook them around the ball. So even at the big league level, where you get players like Edgar Renteria or Alfonso Soriano, when they stride across their back foot and land really closed, which they do, notice that they often hook a big majority of their hits. We want to stay through the ball in a direct line, trying to promote backspin on everything. You're going to have to do that by landing toes on line with one another. Obviously, we don't want the stride foot to land open because this is going to cheat my front hip open, and I'm often going to be pulling off the pitch away prematurely, plus I lose my plate coverage. So if you can think of it two ways, I want to land centered and I want to land square. If I can land centered and square, I'm in a position to attack all pitches on all parts of the plate from the body's strongest position to hit. The majority of deficiencies at ball strike can be directly rewound to a deficiency at the foot down position. We'll start from the ground up again. When a hitter gets too far back at foot down and he's not at center or near center when he begins to rotate, this too is a hitter being stuck back or spin hitting. Where I have a false turn, where you'll often see my rear heel kick out and the weight staying back as I rotate into the baseball. This means I'm not getting a weight transfer against my front side, and that energy won't transfer into the ball itself. When you see that rear heel kick out, that's the determining factor of a false turn. What we should see at center is if I put this bat right behind my heel, once a hitter gets to center, my rear hip takes over from there, and everything below the hip goes along for the ride. So as I rotate on axis, at center, you'll see that my rear heel stays inside the bat instead of kicking out when I'm back too much. So the next one, when I get forward of center slightly, we call this a hip slide. And when I get forward of center, I've released energy into my front leg before I've got into rotation. So two things happen here. One, I'm not going to have as much backside energy to transfer into the ball because I've already lost some of it during the slide. Two, once my body's sliding forward of center into heel plant, I have two moving objects going towards each other when one should be stationary. Remember, when I get to heel plant in the centered position, there is no more forward movement by the body. So I'm essentially speeding the ball up because I'm still moving forward when I shouldn't be. That 85-mile-an-hour fastball now seems like 88 to 90. Spacing is very important in the stride. Spacing for an adult hitter, that's high school and above, is going to be 60% of the hitter's height. For a youth hitter, I have them around 50% of their height. So if you get a hitter that is too wide, and very rarely do I get youth or amateur hitters that are too wide at foot down. The tendency is most of them are too narrow at foot down. But I get the hitter that's too wide, what you'll find, and the problem with it, is that they aren't strong enough in the lower body to allow rotation to pull their rear knee underneath their head. So that's the point of contact I want to be. The rear knee will be right underneath my head and my shoulder. So when they get too wide, they lose leverage and they're not able or strong enough to pull the rear leg around as it goes through rotation. Think of it this way, the lower leg, because it's going for the ride during rotation, the hips have taken over at this point, it ends up becoming like a 1,000-pound weight that the lower body just isn't strong enough to pull along. It's dead weight. So how we check that in that 60% range for an adult or 50% range for a youth hitter is you'll find that's a very good position to get full utilization out of the legs. It's wide enough to fully utilize them, but at the same time not too wide where I can't get the rear knee to go underneath the head by contact. Spacing that is too narrow is a more frequent problem. When you get inside those ranges that I talked about, you'll often find the legs don't have room to work. The way I cue it is this. I always say that my rear kneecap has eyeballs on it. And when it makes the initial turn, and notice I'm not fully rotated in that initial turn, the kneecap wants to see distance still to the front leg. If that distance is there, I can complete rotation and get a full release of the backside. If that distance is condensed and that rear knee, as soon as it makes the turn, is right on top of my front leg, that energy has to go somewhere. And rather than my body staying down through rotation as I'm level in the zone, what ends up happening is that energy is displaced up. And when that energy goes up, we're coming off plane with our swing, makes it much harder to have solid contact at that point. So plus, when the energy is displaced upwards, we're not fully getting everything out of our lower body drive at that point. So we want to be at that 60% range for an adult in spacing, 50% for a youth hitter. So the old adage of saying I need to have a 3 or 4 inch stride just isn't true. Stride is a complete byproduct of how wide I am in my stance and then correlation to my height. So a hitter that starts narrower is going to have to stride further to get to that 60% range. A hitter that is wider isn't going to have to move as far to get to that same 60% hitting position. So it's all a byproduct of how narrow or wide you start and the hitter's height.